Okay, just so everybody knows, we do record this. We'll make sure Zach isn't coming in as a participant. Good morning. We'll be getting started in just a moment. A little concerned about where Zach is.
He's there. He's listed as an attendee, so you might have to make him a panelist, unless there was a different. I see him listed as an attendee.
Ah, gotcha. Oh, and there's so he says he's here. So he has to use the same link that we used yesterday, right?
Looks like he's logged off.
Ah, there. Okay, he's coming in. All right, there you are, Zach. Great.
Okay, got it figured out.
All right. All right. Sorry for the short delay, ladies and gentlemen. So we'll get started. So first of all, welcome to a webinar on how to recruit, hire, retain, and retain people with developmental disabilities. We'll go an hour, about an hour, maybe a few minutes past that. And we really appreciate everybody's participation and involvement. First of all, I'm Gordon O'Neill, and I'm the Working Together campaign coordinator. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia, and run a marketing and communications firm that does a lot of work in the developmental disabilities arena. We do work in the state of Ohio, Georgia, North Carolina, Louisiana, and Kansas, and work with those DD councils, as we call them, developmental disabilities councils in each state, and help them communicate and engage with their constituencies. So happy to be here. Jeff Arsenault is supposed to be with us. This is the only time we haven't started at 10 a.m. So he might be confused on that. If he comes back, I will let him introduce himself. Hopefully he'll join us. He's got a number of emails and phone messages. Like to turn it over to Desiree to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Desiree Provost. I currently support our community as president of Acadiana SHRM, and I'm very happy to be here today.
Good to have you. And now introduce yourself, Crystal.
Hi, my name is Crystal Romaine. I am the regional manager of Louisiana Rehabilitation Services, which is the state vocational rehabilitation agency in the Acadiana area, and I'm a vocational rehabilitation counselor by trade.
Very good, very good. And our special guest this morning is Zach Hager. Zach, you would like to introduce yourself?
Special guest, I like it. Zach Hager, I am Vice President of Economic Development for One Acadiana.
All right, and you had some comments you wanted to share with us.
Sure. If you want, you can go ahead to, perfect. For those who may not be familiar, One Acadiana is a regional economic development organization representing about 9 parishes in South Louisiana. We also serve as the Chamber of Commerce for Lafayette. So you can see we represent about over 600 businesses and individuals throughout the 9 parish region. As you can see here, our mission, is to be the leading force in the improvement of business environment, economic health, and prosperity in the region. I run the business development team here at One Acadiana, whose main focus is recruiting new business to create jobs and investment in the region, as well as working with existing business and industry to help them grow, as well as creating new jobs and new investment in Acadiana. We also have a policy department that focuses on advocacy and a number of different initiatives from workforce, education, and infrastructure. But today I just want to share a few comments on some economic indicators that we track for our investors and members here at One Acadiana. So you can see on your screen, these are the most recent unemployment rates from the Louisiana Workforce Commission for May of 2021. The Acadiana region is at about 6.2%. As you can see, the percentage point changes from year over. April and May of 2020 were particularly rough, as many of you saw with the economy basically being turned off due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We're almost 6 percentage points lower in unemployment than we were in May of 2020. If you look over to your right, you can see how we compare to other regions in the state. As you may have noticed, the Southeast or New Orleans region is still the highest unemployment rate. That's largely due to the concentration in the hospitality, leisure and hospitality industries there in New Orleans. And you can see in May of 2020, they were all the way at 16.7%. So they've been hit particularly hard by the voluntary shutdown of the economy due to COVID. You can go to the next slide, please. Give you an idea on where some of those job losses occurred and where we've seen gains by industry. So this data is available at the MSA level. Within Lafayette MSA, you can see a number of gains. We've had an increase in leisure and hospitality, but we have had, and it's in line with the state, still a decrease in manufacturing jobs, lost about 1,500 from May of 2020 to 2021. The state lost about 4,600 manufacturing jobs as well. And although leisure and hospitality, we gained about 3,800 jobs from this time last year, we're still down about 1,500 leisure and hospitality jobs within the Lafayette MSA. As for the state, that's also true, although we're up about almost 47,000 year over. The state is down still about 38,000 jobs in the leisure and hospitality industry. So that's one of those industries that's been hit particularly hard during the pandemic. Wanted to give folks kind of an idea on employment and how the changes in employment due to the pandemic and how they kind of compare to other recessions or downturns in the economy. You can go to the next slide. This gives you an idea of, this is our 9 parish employment in the Acadiana region. And you can kind of see the changes in employment due to a few different economic shocks. The Great Recession, which happened back in 2008, 2009. You can see it actually happened a little bit later in Louisiana than it did in the rest of the country. We lost about 7.4% of our employment, or about 22,000 jobs. You can see the steady increase until the 2014, when we hit the oil and gas downturn, where we lost about 37,000 jobs. over that span with the downturn in the price of oil. As many of you are aware, there's a number of oil and gas service companies within the Acadiana region. It's always been a large part of our economy. And as you can see, it's represented here in the drop of employment over that downturn. And then finally, you see where the pandemic compares. So the COVID-19, when we shut down the economy, from March and April of 2020, you could see the cliff that we fall off of, where we lost about 44,000 jobs in Acadiana. Now, because it was a voluntary shut off of the economy, and that we've slowly started to reopen after that, you can see a fairly rapid recovery to the tune of about 3,200 jobs a month. We are still below pre-pandemic employment levels, but economists that I've kept up with have seen those. It's trending more optimistic as far as the time when we'll hit full recovery from the pandemic. One other thing to note with the employment, some of you may remember during the Great Recession, you may have heard the term the Great Man Session thrown around. Men were disproportionately affected by the Great Recession, and women lost more jobs. Usually when I present this data, I ask the question, and most people know right off the bat, with the pandemic, women have been disproportionately affected and left the labor market more than men. As you might imagine, that's largely due to a disproportionate burden of childcare with kids who left school during the pandemic when everyone was sent home. They bore a larger burden of childcare and exited the labor force at a disproportionate rate than men. So with schools reopening and the economy reopening, we're hoping to see those women re-enter the workforce, but it is worth mentioning that they were disproportionately affected by the downturn during the COVID-19 pandemic. So all this data, I know it's early in the morning, so I don't want to bore everyone with too much economics, but wanted to give everyone an idea of kind of where we've been and how the pandemic has affected employment and where we are currently. And with that, I'm happy to turn it back over to you, Gordon.
All right, great. Thank you, Zach. Just want to encourage everybody to participate. You can submit questions via Zoom on the chat. You'll also get a survey for comments. And after this webinar this morning, so please fill those out. It helps us improve our curriculum. What you should receive is a curriculum booklet from us. You should have already received that. That's about a 28-page booklet, and it details a lot of what I speak about, or we will be speaking about this morning. And the PowerPoint and the recording will be online. After the call, you can find it at laddcworkingtogether.com curriculum resources. And so that way you can go back and actually see the entire presentation. Secondly, I'd like to point out this curriculum, one, has just been recently approved by SHRM for continuing education credits. But I also want to mention SHRM and all the work that they do in the area of employing people with disabilities, cognitive disabilities, and those types of things. So much of what you'll be hearing about today is really based on a lot of their research and papers that you can go online and find if you're a SHRM member. And I would encourage those that take this seriously, please avail yourself of those resources. We also have relied on Louisiana Rehabilitation Services extensively, the development of this curriculum. And then we also ODEP, which is the Office of Disability Employment Policy in Washington, D.C., building an inclusive workforce. So all of these organizations have contributed to our curriculum here today and the booklet that I made reference to. Really, our goal is to improve what we call competitive integrated employment. And by that, we're talking about people with disabilities historically have been segregated into workshops, and everybody in the workshop was perhaps had a disability. And so that's not when people with disabilities thrive. So we're after a competitive, integrated employment opportunities for people with disabilities. That way they begin to, one, achieve financial security. Two, they begin to create friends outside of their family and immediate sphere of influence. And that's very, very important to people with disabilities. So many of them are living in some form of isolation. They only interact with their parents or family, immediate family. They might be in a small group home and those types of things. And that doesn't get them to stretch and become who they might really become. So getting them out into the workforce and integrating and engaging with other people is very, very important. So today what we're doing is giving you step-by-step strategies to successfully recruit, hire, and retain people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in that inclusive workforce. The council, the Louisiana Developmental Disabilities Council, when we talk about disabilities, we're talking about people that tend to have the disability emerge in their youth before the age of 21. Could be cerebral palsy, could be autism, those types of things that are often seen. So now when Crystal's talking, she talks about all disabilities. So somebody that has been hurt on the job at age 28 and had to go through rehabilitation and those types of things. So it's just a little bit different lingo, but we all are committed to trying to improve the employment opportunities for people with disabilities. And from you as an employer, we hope that we can really help you access a unique pool of potential employees with a diversity of skills who are eager and reliable and committed to succeeding in a competitive and integrated workforce. We'll talk about some of the, let me see. Is Lynette's hand up? I have not seen anybody's hand up, so I'll continue on. Strategic options. We want you to be able to do this yourself. That's option number one. We hope that we give you enough background that you could feel comfortable in integrating or talking to and engaging people with disabilities in your employment strategies. You can rely on Louisiana Rehabilitation Services, and they offer a lot of service help to employers, and Crystal will go into detail on that a little later. Or you can rely on specialized placement and consulting agencies, and I'll give you a list of some of those in your community. Goodwill Industries, they train people, and then they're very anxious to go out and place them. So there's any number of other opportunities that you might be able, places you might contact to see if they have people ready for hire. So why would you as an employer really want to start concentrating on employing people with disabilities? And so this is some of these things we've learned from SHRM. Employers just tend to love the enthusiasm that they bring to the workplace. And that's very, very, very important. And they have a certain reliability and can actually improve team productivity. You might say, okay, well, I would expect a person with a disability to be slower, perhaps, or I might expect them, whatever your good morning, Jeff, how are you?
Do I really have to answer that?
No, but I'll get back to you. I'll come back to you.
All right.
And so, but what you'll find is people with disabilities are a little bit more disciplined in getting to work on time, getting back from breaks on time, and those types of things. And they actually begin setting a new culture in place as you see them taking the extra effort to be your best employee they can be. And so with that, all of a sudden, all other employees start saying, well, if they're heading back to the desk or work or wherever, perhaps I should go with them. And so you start seeing that that role that they play in producing more enthusiasm and those types of things. And according to Sherm's research, they have staying power. They tend to stay in place longer. They're less likely to be job hopping, which is an issue these days, as I understand it. And that between the team productivity, the staying power, and stability in your workforce, they begin saving you money. And so it's something that you really should look at. And when Crystal talks, she'll talk about some incentives that are in place for you to really take advantage of hiring people with disabilities. This group also tends to strive for continuous improvement. They are inspirational in that drive that they have. Sometimes they have to be, depending upon a cognitive disability or whatever, they might have to be told numerous times how you want something done. But in the end, they tend to continue to strive to be better and better understand what it is you're trying to get them to do. And they're happy to be there. Not all employees are always happy to be there. And so people with disabilities tend to be very, very happy to have a job and to be there. So I also kind of want to comment on creativity, innovation, and energy. So my firm not only works with people with disabilities and is involved in all their communications work, we also go into colleges and recruit youngsters to come into our internship program. And we had one young man, Deontay, and so he joined us. I'll talk about his interview process a little later. And so Deontay was a video producer, and his first effort was not to our standards. And it was not something that I could submit to the client and say, we produced this and what have you. And so instead, we had to sit him down, and we were very frank about it, said, Deontay, this is not up to our standards and you've got to do better. And we talked about it a little bit. And it was just kind of a bland interview, you know, nothing going on. And so Deontay just loves milkshakes. And so he decided that all his interviews would take place with the milkshake for the interviewee and his own milkshake. And he's called it Shaking It Up with Deontay. And all of a sudden, Deontay gets the idea that creativity and innovation are part of the job. His energy level just took off. And those are the types of things that you can expect when you hire people with disabilities. Now, I will like to introduce the 2019 recipient of the Ken Vince Memorial Award as presented by the governor to Mr. Jeff Arsenault. Jeff, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I appreciate it. First, I owe everybody a big apology. I made a mistake. I'm on the West Coast and I'm just confused. So I'm Jeff Arsenault. I'm 48 years old. I spent 20 years in South Carolina in retail and management, grocery distribution and retail management. And I relocated, went through some life lessons and realized that I had some changing to do because I had everything. I had a job, I had a house, but I was not okay. and I relocated to back home, Louisiana. And I looked in the mirror now. I said, what do I need to do to be happy? Well, get in touch with my disability. Well, from there, I started a career kind of using my past, positive and negative, to move the needle as it pertains to employment. Because I know as a manager, how it feels when we see somebody with a disability walk up to the interview process. And I know from starting my life over how difficult it is. So I'm really excited to be here, and I think it's time that we really take advantage of these programs and get people with disabilities to work and allow them to help us build our business. So looking forward to being here.
All right, great. Good to have you with us. So I'm going to just go through a 4-step process. And, going back to some of the resources, some of them had 13-step processes. And so I'm trying to keep it as simple as we possibly can. You need to plan your recruitment. You need to create the culture. You need the recruiting, the hiring, and then accommodation and retention. Nobody should be out there trying to hire people with the expectation that they'll be gone shortly. I would say, just going back to some of Zach's comments, some of the most interest we have seen is really out of the hospitality industry in all the previous presentations that we've made. So we'll be talking about fostering a welcoming recruitment and hiring process. How do you do that? How to be flexible and open to the talents of all qualified individuals. And how to focus on abilities, not disabilities. And I know this is not the first time Desiree ever heard that statement. Let's see. And so planning first, we would recommend the first thing you do is, and you probably all do this, have your own SWOT analysis of your HR situation. What are your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats within the organization's workforce? Identify those specific job titles and functions or needs that may offer an opportunity for someone with a disability. And also identify those that are a problem for you. You might have a high retention rate in a specific area, specific function, job function. How can people with disabilities help stabilize that part of the workforce? Once you've kind of got that figured out, then you need to start thinking about job customization and support strategies. Okay, what can I do to make this job a little bit more accessible to people with disabilities? And what supports might I provide? And it could be this person, because of cerebral palsy, doesn't have the strength on the right side to move a box that weighs 40 pounds. And that's part of the process. But with a roller system or something, we can get that done, or the employees that is next to them comes and gets it instead of them taking it over. So you just kind of rethink some of these processes, and you start looking at ways people with disabilities might fit into a work environment.
I would also add, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, is that you need to, when you're having these conversations, you need to make sure you have your subject matter experts in those areas at the table. I think a lot of times in organizations, they come together and they believe they have the answers, but they don't include the right parties at the table to initiate those discussions. And it's important to be vulnerable and say, we don't know it all, so we're going to bring people who do know it all to properly guide us. So that way, when you're making these changes with pure intentions, you're doing it the right way and you're not having to backtrack to correct something because you didn't have the right person at the table. So whether that's your HR person, whether that's a consultant you bring in to say, how do we make our jobs or how do we make our organization more accessible? What changes do we need to make to our postings? What changes do we need to make to our positions, our departments, to make it more accessible to those with disabilities, to have an open environment? You bring those people at the table to have a good foundation of that conversation.
And also, if I might add, the follow through in making these decisions. I'll talk about later on how if you make the decision at the top before we implement it, we need to involve the whole staff and make sure we all are aware of what's going on. Because it's the people on the front lines who are working with these individuals with disabilities. Good point, Desiree. Thank you.
Jeff, I definitely agree with that, because while you're making the plan, you also need to educate your workforce for that adjustment that's going to take place, because they need to be prepared on how to navigate and know what that change is going to look like to their work environment. And they need to be educated, because a lot of times people have good intentions, but they just don't know any better, right? They've never been exposed and they don't understand what those things look like. So having that necessary training, when you bring that consultant in, you bring someone in who can lay the foundation and let them know what to expect, what changes they'll have to make, how certain things in that culture is going to now shift in order for them to be prepared for it. Because it's one thing to say we're going to change our culture and we're going to change our processes and we're going to write it on a piece of paper and then poof, it's just going to all happen. But if you don't have that backing and support and buy-in from your team, then it's all for nothing.
Good point. I love it.
All right.
Mr. Gordon, it looks like Ms. Lynette wants to know where to find the consultants.
Okay. One will be talking about that. Thank you. I was trying to find Lynette's comment. And so as we go forward, I think we'll fill that in for her. One of them might be Jeff Arsenault. You could include job coaching and supported employment services through LRS or Louisiana Rehabilitation Services. You can rely on Goodwill Industries and some others. And actually the curriculum has a list of them that are localized and customized for y'all local markets. So I believe that's on page 17 of that curriculum that went out. So you'll be able to find it there. All right. So very good. Good lead into exactly that. Next step from my point was job coaching, supported employment. There are service dogs. There are people that actually with severe disabilities that might have an aide that goes to work with them as provided by the state or some other agency, and even assistive technologies. And that's everything from glasses are assistive technology, and that's part of it. So what somebody need, and Jeff will talk about that at some length in a moment. Just reevaluate, and this kind of goes along with what Desiree was just saying. Reevaluate your own HR's openness to unsolicited applications and new applications from people with disabilities. Look at your recruiting message. How can it or should it be encouraging people with disabilities to apply? Very, very important in how you're going to approach and engage with senior management and supervisors in developing a new recruiting strategy. From our standpoint, we'll want you to think about readapting your application, adapting your interview process, improve onboarding. These are the types of things that if in your HR process should be good shape anyway, but now how can we make them a little bit more open, a little bit more accessible? So I think some of the most exciting types of opportunities are considering internships, on-the-job training, and mentoring programs. And so that's one of the things that our organization, my firm, has done, is gone to colleges and recruited people out of we call them in Georgia, IPSI programs, which is post-secondary programs for people with disabilities. And then consider partnering with Louisiana Rehabilitation Services or a specialized placement service provider. And I'll give you more specifics about who that might be here in a minute. And then just ensure fairness and prevent discrimination in, all that you do. As Jeff, you like to say, no sympathy, maybe a little empathy.
Yeah. But I mean that we're, keep in mind, we're going to work to make a living. We're not going to work to have friends, or that should be the case. We need to know that you got my back. And when I feel sympathy, when I feel, oh my goodness, you must be in pain, that does something. That tells me that the person training me doesn't really know me. He doesn't know what I can do, what I can't do. So it's a good, it's step one is no sympathy, have a little empathy.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Really some key strategies are really matching, and I talked about a little bit, but matching job requirements and abilities. Focus on the ability. What can Jeff do? What are my needs? Where does he fit into our manufacturing process or our services that we provide? And then start on that, job development strategy. Identify those skills for vacant positions, match potential qualified candidates with the position. And you may even have to go negotiate the job description with the supervisor as you're trying to help somebody or find a place for somebody like Jeff with cerebral palsy into your workforce. That customization I was talking about might not have the strength to move the box. How do we change the process to make him or her a very valuable part of our team? Job coaching, this is something I think Crystal will probably comment on. There are, and Goodwill Industries are among others, they actually will provide you ongoing job coaching and can intervene if things aren't going well, if needed be, or can go in and find out, kind of take the pulse of that employee or your employees with disabilities and make sure they're moving forward. Assistive technology and accommodations. This can include software, equipment, people with that are hearing deficient, use special telephone equipment, those types of things. Those are just those accommodations that do not cost a ton of money. Jeff, you might want to talk about accommodations.
Yeah, so many times when a CEO or management hears accommodation, they think we're gonna have to build a ramp, we're gonna have to build an elevator. They think money, they think bottom line. But all the accommodations, and I try to use more every day to help me, because the word accommodation kind of means just sit down, just stop and think about what do I need right now and communicate that with the right people. I was on a new job about 4 years ago, and it was an office job, and I struggled with my fine motor skills. And I was at my desk, and the keyboard started sliding. and it threw me off. So I'm sitting there struggling for a few days. And in my mind, I'm going back to my management days and how I've only been here three days. I don't want to go ask her to spend a bunch of money on me. So I walked in her office. I said, I'm hesitant. First off, I shouldn't have hesitated. Second off, I said, I'm hesitating to ask you, but can you come watch me work? Because you might have some ideas. And she came and watched me work. She left, came back with 4 pieces of Velcro that turned my job upside down for the better, because it kept the keyboard in place. First lesson, I've got to allow people to help me, and people have to open the door to helping me. It's a dual, we're doing this thing together. But the word accommodation for me means let's just sit down and brainstorm on what can we move this here? Can we, you know, it's unlimited, the thought process that if we just sit down and think and communicate what's going on, we can come up with a simple accommodation.
I would agree with him on that. Sometimes accommodations come with a negative context. As someone in the HR field, when you hear it initially, it's like we have to do something specifically to one person for one person. But what typically happens is those accommodations actually positively impact the work environment for all employees, whether they have a disability or not. So that initial investment, and sometimes it's not a lot financially, it's just taking the time to be creative to truly see what the actual need is and what we're trying to solve in that moment can open up wonders. And I wanted to add, when we were talking about matching job requirements and abilities, we kind of geared it specifically to if you have a person with disabilities in mind already. But I want to challenge organizations to not wait for that person to come to you, but to create that environment to attract them to your organization. So you have those things set in place already to where you're not going to wait for them to come knock at your door, because not everyone's going to have that outspoken personality to say, hey, I'm looking for something. Do you have something that fits my needs? But to be creative when you are looking at your jobs, when you're looking at your requirements, when you're looking at your descriptions, to say this can be open and welcome to anyone, whether they're in a wheelchair, whether they have a learning disability, whether they have cognitive disabilities, whatever that may be open to that. And then sometimes there's organizations in our community. There's a local organization where they partner with those with citizens that have disabilities and try to get them in the workplace. So there's companies that will partner with that organization to bring them in. And it's simple things like for us they come in and they help clean up our dining areas and our cafeterias at the hospitals. Small things. They come for about 2 to 3 hours a day. It brings joy to our visitors and our patients because they're bubbly, they're happy, they visit, and it also gives those a sense of purpose. So that initial partnership, we're getting something because we're able to open up our organizations to provide those opportunities. We're able to allow them to engage with our patients and our visitors and our staff members. So know that there may be organizations in your local communities that allow that as well. I have a family member who has a developmental disability, and she goes to work 2 days a week. Okay, and you know what she does 2 days a week? She makes meat pies, and that's the best 2 days a week in her life, when she goes for 4 hours 2 days a week to make her meat pies. And simple things like that has directly impacted her, and she's able to give back and have a sense of purpose. She earns some cash for herself, and she has that set of independence. So be creative. Don't put yourself in a box. Don't wait for them to come to you. Open up those opportunities. Seek out those organizations, because trust me, they're looking for you just as much as you're wanting to create that environment in your organization.
Great, thank you. Crystal, would you like to talk about Louisiana Rehabilitation Services?
I definitely would. And thank everybody for attending. I wanted to go into a little bit more detail. And as Gordon mentioned earlier, Louisiana Rehab Services focuses on a multitude of disabilities. And a lot of times when people think about the word disability, it has a negative connotation, or they have a certain preconceived idea of what that means. But I will disclose, I'm a person with a disability. I'm a hearing aid wearer. You can't even see it, nor can you tell. And I'm, I'm the manager of this state agency here in Acadiana. So I want that, the reason for disclosing that is to remove any preconceived ideas one may have about what a person with a disability is. Louisiana Rehabilitation Services works with many individuals, and it's not just entering people into the workforce, it's helping to retain valuable employees. That's something people often forget. So that's something I wanted to introduce. And we spoke a little bit about that. I'm gonna go into detail. But one thing that we do that many people in the area do not realize is we do on-the-job training for VR, means vocational rehabilitation, which that's the primary focus of our agency. For those with salary reimbursement, and it's intended for permanent employees. It's full or part-time positions paying a competitive salary. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about the parameters of that when we talk about incentives. Job analysis, skills training, individualized job coaching, and follow-up services. We partner with 6 different vendors that we contract their services for, and they go out and assess the jobs and what the job skills are so that we can make sure that we have an individual who can perform the tasks. If, as we mentioned before, there's a little bit of something that needs to be done, we do things like carve jobs. Sometimes it's skills exchange. There may be a duty that there's someone, everybody has to do it every day, and it's something that someone else can take that task away, and so they can focus on other functions of the job. So sometimes it's just restructuring the job duties so that we have someone doing certain parts of the job while other people concentrate on other areas of the job. So with that being said, it ends up creating a position that wasn't there before, but with productivity, it ends up making it a more productive environment. Individualized job coaching is something that when we, over here, we're staffed with vocational rehabilitation counselors, and a lot of people aren't familiar with that job title or that job position. There's actually degrees in rehabilitation counseling, and those are individuals who study people with disabilities and what is needed to get them to work or to keep jobs. And that is our industry here. There is that industry, and we do have that. We have that service available. We have with Louisiana Rehab Services, when a person is a consumer, we refer to them as consumers as opposed to clients. When they're a consumer of our agency, we partner with and purchase rehabilitation engineering. Rehabilitation engineering is an actual engineer who studies job accommodations. So that is a service that people do not know is out there. It can be, but a job accommodation can be identified just as Jeff and Desiree spoke earlier. It does not have to be anything complicated. And I love the way Jeff mentioned, we sat down and we brainstormed. There was not a professional involved. The professional was Jeff and his skills, and the employer and their knowledge of the simple task that job involved. So a job accommodation can just be, I know, realistically, a page magnifier. As you get a certain age, you can't see the tiny print anymore. So something as simple as a page magnifier could be considered a job accommodation. And we work with, and since the focus of this is developmental disabilities, a person often considers a developmental disability as being a cognitive disability, and that is absolutely not correct. A developmental disability is anything that has been identified prior to the age of 21 that affects their development. So we have individuals who are visually impaired, who were born visually impaired, who have physical impairments, who we have paid for college degrees. So we focus on vocational rehabilitation. So we are looking at very skilled individuals. And even as a rehabilitation professional, we get into jobs that the consumer knows more about than we do. I'm only have only a certain skill set for a computer science curriculum. That is not my forte. I sit with my consumer and together we develop and decide accommodations, or we may have to purchase a rehab engineer services. They go to the job site and they assess what can be identified to help a person perform a task. It can be, a lot of it has to do with technology. And guys, with today's technology, it is unlimited what can be rectified. It is unlimited. It's today, there's almost a technology or a software out there to accommodate most limitations that involve communication, visual disabilities, and physical disabilities. So for instance, a wheelchair is considered assistive technology. We also help with modifying vehicles. So if a person has to use a wheelchair because of their disability, they need to get to and from the job. So we help with the vehicle modification. Jeff mentioned ramps and wheel elevators. That's another thing. Open sesame doors. That's when the door is too heavy for a person with a disability to access it. There are things that it's called an open sesame door, where it assists with basically making the door electrical so that the person can get into an environment. That's assistive technology. That's a work site modification. So I wanted to talk about that because that can open doors for many people with disabilities. We have here with Louisiana Rehab Services, we call them a REDS for short, and we use a lot of acronyms in my industry, but RED stands for Rehabilitation Employment Development Specialist. We have a person on staff who works with individuals and trying to seek out employers who have jobs available. And they can work with that individual. Besides the 6 agencies that we contract services with, the 6 agencies provide placement and more coaching. When the person doesn't really need coaching and they just need to go out and get a job, they're skilled. We've maybe helped them with trainings or certifications. He can help access that for them. Disability etiquette and sensitivity training, of course, a lot of that happens once the person is placed. So we have a consumer who's come through our agency. We have these consultants, either through the vendors we have purchased services through, or through our employment development specialist here. And someone who comes through our agency is also partnered with a counselor who is skilled in vocational rehabilitation. And a lot of our counselors have masters in rehabilitation and they're certified rehabilitation counselors. So that's their skill set. We go to hiring events and job fairs. We're there to be available because we're one of Acadiana and Louisiana's best kept secrets. People don't know about us. We're available. And tax incentives for employers. We'll talk about that on the next slide. So I mentioned on-the-job training. What our on-the-job training program consists of is wage reimbursement at time and a half for up to 3 months. So it's considered a short-term training program. A lot of people don't know we have that available. So oftentimes we have an individual who they just need a chance. They need a chance to prove themselves. This is an opportunity for them to have that chance. And for an employer, what's the risk? Really nothing. We're going to pay their wages and another half. So consider it the time that your employee is going to have to spend to sort of teach them the job. But realistically, they're going to have to spend that time teaching anybody the job, because every agency I know has a period of time where you have to just kind of learn. Even if you have a degree or even if you have a certain skill set, you still need time to learn how it's done in that agency. So realistically, every job has a period of time where we need. So we do have that time and a half reimbursement. And again, I did mention earlier, that person is considered a permanent employee. So it's not considered, we just do it while the 3 months is happening. They're expected to stay there. So this is just a way for you to get to know them. Now, we always have employers say, well, what happens if, they do something horrible? Well, of course, if they do something horrible, you treat them as every other employee. They are your employee. But the idea behind on-the-job training is to get a valued employee and have extra time to train them at no risk to you. What's happening now, and there's a huge focus on working with youth with disabilities. There is an act that was signed. A lot of people are familiar with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Another act that's been signed is called WIOA, Workforce Investment Opportunities. It created a lot of new things in our industry. And one of those things is working with youth. We always worked with youth, but this is a focus on getting them while they're still in school, teaching them work skills, or giving them work experiences so that they come out with an idea of what work is all about. They have an idea of what budgeting is. They're being shown through work experience. And I mentioned we like acronyms. That is called work-based learning experiences. So with our students with disabilities, that is somewhat like an on-the-job training, but it is expected to just be short-term. It's not permanent. It's a work experience, and we reimburse the wages for that. It's not time and a half for the students, but it is their straight time plus the 9.33%, which is the amount of benefits and unemployment. Workers' comp and things that you're expected to add on to their benefits. So really, there's no risk for also helping students get work experiences prior to. And what has been the beauty of this is a lot of times the individuals who are going to be students who are going to go straight into work, they're not likely going to go into any kind of an education. They want to be straight to work students. They end up sometimes turning into full-time employment. So that's the beauty of all this, is that we give them experiences and they get an idea of what work is all about. And sometimes the employers say, well, this is a valuable employee, I'm going to keep them on. Gordon had some information about the disabled tax credit and work opportunities tax credit. They're not actually offered through us, but because we've identified the person as having a disability, these are things you should check into. So I went ahead and I added some links into there so you can actually link into those websites and get more information. The disabled tax credit is for small businesses if you have to provide access for a person with disabilities. So there's more information if you click into the link, but that's just a little blurb about that. A lot of businesses and employers do not know about that. And work opportunity tax credit also has its certain parameters, but individuals who come through our agency, they are one of the classes of individuals who qualify for work opportunity tax credit.
Well, great. Thank you, Crystal. I would just like to point out, we've had a number of these webinars, and One of the other regional managers pointed out that in the past year, they had refunded over $100,000 to one employer through the on-the-job training program. So it can be a very significant program if you commit to it and really add to your bottom line. Our firm really has relied on the college level type person. It's coming out with communication skills and those types of things. So take advantage of these programs. You'll find a lot of interesting people there. And I'd also say that typically if you call into a LRS office, they typically have any number of job ready applicants that they can send out for interviews and what have you. So very, very important part of this process. Just senior management support. We're running a little bit behind, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. Just as you are you doing your diversity and recruitment goals? Disability should be a part of that goal. How are we going to communicate with this community? How can we improve our inclusion of disabled people in our workforce? Adopting policies that provide workforce flexibility. And if you listen to Desiree, she's talking about creativity, flexibility, and accommodations for applicants and employees. You know, are you willing to accept a service animal and those types of things? You know, that's part of getting senior management on board and prepared early on. Visible public commitment to recruit, hire, and retain in advance qualified people with disabilities. The CEO, you know, maybe in your officer or staff meetings, everybody talks about it, but what's the public statement that your company makes about your willingness to hire people with disabilities? I think that's a big part of getting senior management to truly commit. And presuming ability, normalizing supports, and promoting self-determination is really a key part of the recruiting effort. Jeff and people like Jeff, they have the same desire as anybody else does. They want to self-determine what they do, how they do things. And so that's part of having that flexibility that we like to talk about. And then you got to create a coalition, first with senior management level, and then even down to the supervisory level and on to the workforce. You don't want everybody else concerned with, excuse me, somebody just raised their hand, so I get distracted by that. My apologies. But that workforce has to be as welcoming as the senior management people. And so that's that sensitivity training and those types of things are an important part of that. You know, going back and making sure everybody understands why you're going into this initiative. What the SWOT analysis is telling you, what the number of unfilled jobs are, what the capabilities and abilities of the people that you might be looking at might bring to the table, how you can reduce turnover rates, absenteeism, and tardiness. All that is very, very, very important. And create a profile of the workers in your service area, including those with developmental disabilities, and the training programs and resources available. Talk about that a little bit more a little later. And then Jeff, who's doing the training, by the way?
Yeah, I mentioned this a little earlier. You know, the senior managers come out with this big initiative. Oh, wow, bells and whistles, we're going to do this. Well, sometimes we fail to train the ones that are doing the training. And it's more about etiquette, as Crystal said, it's about etiquette training. Has this 18-year-old young lady ever been experienced to someone with CP? Chances are no. So the first 8 hours of that training is going to be a wash because A, nobody let the young lady know that, hey, Jeff's got CP. He's a great guy. He's got some fine motor skills, but he's pretty intelligent. So this whole thing goes deeper than just putting a sign in the break room and saying we hire people with disabilities. And the training line is such a, we don't devote as a culture, we don't devote money to that training like we did 20 years ago. So this is a real critical point, opportunity to grow. Thanks.
All right. So Lynette said she did not get her curriculum, so we'll make sure she gets that back out. So I saw your comment and appreciate you letting me know. So recruiting and hiring, it really requires some creativity, flexibility, commitment to hiring people, ensuring all qualified individuals, including those with disabilities, can participate in an accessible hiring process, beginning with the message. Write your ads, posters, or other communications of people first language. And in the curriculum that I'm talking about, I believe that's on page 27. We actually show you some of the people first language. And it's just writing or language that puts the person first in all that we do and not the disabilities. So just be aware of that. You can look at that and you can Google that online and find extensive resources to help you through that. Assure the application and interview process are accessible and appropriate and reasonable accommodations are made and or available. You know, it's, as I say, is your application so complicated and so small, and so somebody with visual disabilities can't read it and those types of things. So you have to look at all of those pieces that lead up to that recruiting and hiring process. Are they accessible and appropriate? And really would encourage you to look at that. Sure, applicants that the organization welcomes assistive technologies, service animals, perhaps yes or no, that's a policy decision. Supported employment services, if and I have had clients that if you went to a meeting, one in particular had a service animal and an aide with them at all times. And so, you know, that was very significant commitment by that employer to include her in their workforce. Recruiting channels. This is kind of some of the information that Lynette, I think it is, asked about. So if you are trying to figure out how can I reach out to people with disabilities, Louisiana Rehabilitation Services is one of them. And when you get this PowerPoint, and the curriculum, it has Crystal's email, and you can start with email to her or call into their offices. ARC, which is a national organization, has a unit operating there in Acadiana, and they place eligible employees in competitive employment. Family Helping Families also is very important. These are people that all support each other, and so if you have an opportunity, they will distribute it amongst their members and say this job opportunity exists, or this organization is hiring. You might want to have your son, daughter, or whomever apply. Autism Society, I'll have a local chapter there. Goodwill Industries, as I've said, they do job connection, job placement, and in a lot of times you'll see some of these same groups are actually vendors for LRS, and they all are kind of in it somewhat together. You should go to your local high school. and see what their special education program offers, and talk to that faculty and say, here's what I'm looking to do. And if you are here in Atlanta, and I'm sure wherever Chick-fil-A is, very often, just as Desiree was talking about, the lunchroom out front is maintained by people with disabilities often, and those types of things. And a lot of them are youngsters right over out of Wheeler High School in my case. So those are the types of things that you can start doing. Area colleges and universities, if you're looking for more skilled and positions, that's where we go for ours when we're looking for a communication specialist. University of Louisiana at Lafayette and Southwest Louisiana Community College. Zach, y'all aware of anybody else that might be mentioned as a potential college to reach out to?
I think you hit them on the list. I can't think of any others off the top of my head.
All right. And then the Louisiana State-wide Independent Living Council can also get the message out that your organization is hiring. So don't be bashful. And sometimes, you know, you'll call into these organizations and you'll say, this is what I want. Oh, we don't do that. You got to keep precedent. And somewhere in that organization, there's a job placement specialist, I pretty well can assure you. Again, don't be bashful. Seek referrals from your own employees. Reach out to people from your church, your civic or fraternal organizations. Tell them what you're doing. We're looking to hire, and we're looking to hire people with disabilities. And I will tell you, the church I attend has probably 4 or 5 people with disabilities in it. And I'm sure if I were hiring and their mom and dads or aunts and uncles or whomever would certainly want to know about it. Post signage visible to customers announcing job openings with the, you know, people with disabilities are encouraged to apply. And especially on those small cafes and businesses out in the community, go ahead and state what you're trying to accomplish. You can go to disability-related job boards, websites, social networking sites, and advocacy organizations. We have not been real, the ones that are good tend to be more national, and they don't have kind of that local feel to them. The best that I'm aware of is abilitycorps.org. They have online job fairs and that type of thing. So you might look at those. But when you're really trying to hire locally, they may or may not be of value to you. Application process, ensure your receptionists and clerks are welcoming and will, you know, that old body cue, all of a sudden somebody's walking in with cerebral palsy on crutches, that first look of shock or whatever, that's what you're trying to overcome immediately. And so you're trying to make sure whoever's your receptionist are not given those visual cues. Simplify and minimize wording on the job application and eliminate that jargon and complicated language. Provide forms with large print for visually impaired. Allow candidates, will you allow a candidate to apply on tape or provide information by telephone for an application? Do you make it clear that a parent or guardian can help with an online application? And being real honest about it, you need to be prepared to understand and be accepting of spotty employment histories. People with disabilities don't tend to have the perfect employment history, so be prepared to recognize that. And then eliminate questions or requirements that are no longer appropriate or necessary for your new recruiting strategy. As you go into this new area, you might need to rethink some of those basic ideas. Hiring interview process, ensure your walkways, sidewalks are easily accessible. That's a requirement by law. Applicants, just as Crystal, you know, in the conversation said, oh, I have a hearing disability. Once they have told you about it, then you can discuss it. So how does that pertain to your job function? Oh, well, I have an accommodation and I'm able to do my job just fine, and those types of things. So once they discuss it with you, then you're more than encouraged to go ahead and pursue how that affects the job function. If the disability is revealed by the applicant, and allow more time for the interview. Sure, the applicant is free to ask questions. They are just like anyone else. They're going to be nervous during the interview. You might need to just allocate a little bit more time. When I interviewed Deontay, or we did, his mind is moving and his voice box won't connect right away. And so sometimes he doesn't stutter. He just can't get that connection. And it might take him 20 seconds to get that connection put together. So it was could have been a very frustrating interview. But we've been around people with disabilities enough that we quickly responded with no problem whatsoever. I think we've talked about assistive technologies pretty extensively, so we'll skip over that. Retaining employees, it's not a whole lot different than what you do normally. Well-planned, well-executed interview and onboarding process. That's the first step. Well, that's good HR management. Work with the supervisor, making sure they remain easily accessible to the employee, that they're supportive and understanding, that they provide consistent feedback, positive reinforcement, and fast intervention as warranted. So, don't let something go unsaid. Well, that person has a disability, so I have to, I can't address it. That's not right. That's what job coaching is. And so you need to be willing to do that. And if you need to, use a third party. That's exactly what they're there for. Stay attuned to their changes in living arrangements or personal or family relationships. Sure, accommodations remain in place and are updated. So, is it up to date? Transportation, you can ask, do you have reliable transportation? Because transportation is a big issue with people with disabilities. Many can't walk out of the parking lot, get in their car and drive. They've got relying on public transportation, Ubers or whatever. So be aware of that. Let's see, safety. If you're in compliance with fire regulations, you're probably doing just fine. There's alarms for the visually impaired, the flashing lights for the hearing impaired. And so those are very, very important. And it's once you have people with disabilities on staff, you probably should do a fire drill in the early stages of employment, because there's probably a plan to make sure they can evacuate, but you need to test that plan. Last thoughts, people with developmental disabilities have high incidences, sexual abuse, coworkers, friends take advantage of them financially. So the supervisor should be attuned to changes in their demeanor and personality and those types of things. As with all new hires, some work out well and some do not. I speak so highly of Deontay. The second one was somewhat interrupted by COVID, but was not working out as well. That hasn't stopped us. So, remain committed and continue recruiting. Got to be creative, keep an open mind, and recognize that your future hiring decisions and strategies can have a life-changing impact on someone's life. Last but not least, key resources. When you look at the back of your curriculum, you will see extensive list of resources. This is just a small sampling. It's from ODEP, it's from Ask Earn, which is has a lot of very good resources, steps to success, those types of things. So you can depend on those. That list, I think, is on page 25 in the curriculum booklet. Take a look at that. So in conclusion, and I'll come to my panelists here in a second, we hope we gave you some step-by-step strategies to successfully recruit, hire, and retain people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Now you have some ideas of who you can go to get help, to get connected, and that's very, very important. And you'll begin to enjoy employees who truly love their jobs, are reliable, productive, and dedicated to continued improvement. And that becomes inspirational to other employees and customers. I have a cousin's son, second nephew, whatever that might be, with disabilities, and we were all traveling through Ireland, and we're out in the middle of nowhere. Nobody's seen anybody that they know, but Patrick, who works at Publix and bags groceries there, of course, he runs into a friend he's made at Publix, and they had a big reunion and we're hugging and just talking away. And so it really does, it's a life-changing experience. And this is what Desiree said: embrace your creativity, become a leader in your organization, your industry, and your area. And we would appreciate that. Let's see, I'll look for any chats or questions. Okay, all right. So no pending questions. Any final comments from our panelists? And Desiree had to step out.
I just wanted to add one comment. We are involved with the economic development locally, and we do a diversity job fair yearly, and it comes around in October, which is Disability Awareness Month.
Right.
So that would be considered a local recruiting area. If your company would like to become involved in that, get in touch with me. I'll get in touch with the committee and we can talk about it. It doesn't cost anything to be an employer at that job fair. And diversity is any kind of diversity, but persons with disabilities are those people that are included in seeking employment there. So I just wanted to add that.
Very good. Thank you. Zach, any comments?
I'm just happy to partner with you guys on this webinar, and look forward to assisting any way we can. I've learned a lot myself just sitting through and reading the slides. So I appreciate it.
Great, great. Jeff, any final comments?
Yeah, I've enjoyed this seminar. Thank everybody. The word process improvement comes into my head, and so many times we want to get more efficient, and that scares people. But how can we implement process improvement plans in on hiring people with disabilities? Not only to hire people with disabilities, but to make our company better. So I put my name in the chat, my email. I do trainings, I do sensitivity trainings, I do healthy relationship training. So if I can do anything for anybody, reach out to me. Thank you, Gordon.
And I would comment that the FBI is just one of his clients. So Jeff comes with some unique credentials. So I'll just leave it at that. So with that being said, we appreciate everybody who's participated, the panelists. Thank you so much. Everybody that's tuned in. And we hope this puts you on the path to a more inclusive work environment. Thank you so much. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, I owe you one, man. I'm deeply sorry.
That's quite all right. I sent you an email late yesterday and I said, if he's not aware that this starts at 8:30, that was my biggest concern. And but worked out fine.
Was I 45 minutes late or 15 minutes late?
15, I think at the most. Yeah, you got on there pretty quick.
I don't like doing that, but I am sorry.
no apology necessary. I don't know how many times I called you, started calling you every 10 minutes. I said, maybe he'll wake up or whatever.
I know when I saw 5 missed calls from Gordon, I'm like, oh, I jumped out of bed. I woke up then. I'm like, good. Now, what, we got 2 more or 1 more?
One more, the 27th, Tuesday, the 27th, I think it is, 10 a.m.
Are y'all gonna pursue this next year? I know you're going away, but are they gonna continue?
We have had some conversations already with the new executive director. And I think when we do our report, we're going to, so it is part of their 5-year plan.
Yeah, but did they get it? Did that come out?
You mean, has it been adopted?
Yeah.
Probably not to date. It's in the process. And so I would expect it to be a part of their 5-year plan. Rarely are those significantly edited by Washington or anything like that. So you can expect, I think, a commitment to a 5-year program. But I don't think they know what that is. In my estimation, talking to employers is key. You can have these for consumers, and you can fill up, if I'd promoted this to consumers, it would have been just filled up. But they need to get somebody of some significance behind it, that all the chambers, if the chambers get an email saying, okay, I need you to get behind this, whether it's from the governor or whomever. When we were over in North Carolina and did it on site, we would visit, and have, generally we had a hospital sponsoring it and maybe the local chambers, and we would fill up rooms, but we had a big speaker, and that helped us do that. So,
well, just keep my name in the company's mind, and whatever I can do more, I want to do more.
Well, we're trying to figure out if we can do more for the local council, y'all's council there in Louisiana. And I think we're trying to get actually over to visit with the new executive director.
Really?
I think yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So anyway, well, enjoy the rest of your vacation. You're visiting family, I assume?
No, visiting, I got engaged.
Say what?
I got engaged.
No.
Yeah, I came to Colorado and I proposed. Come in. I proposed to this lovely lady.
Well, good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Just great. Well, you're getting hitched to a great guy. I think the world of Jeff.
I know that.
No, I'm going home tonight.
All right. Well, you're going home a victor. Congratulations. Yeah. That's just wonderful. I'm happy for you.
Thanks a lot. I'll see you in a few weeks.
All right. Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.
You know what? He's in, I'm trying to leave.
Yeah, I'm trying to. There you go. I think I'm about to do it. Yeah. End meeting for all.